The Loose Women studio had seen its fair share of heated debates, awkward silences, and unexpected walkouts, but nothing quite like what was about to unfold that Tuesday morning. The red, on-air, light blinked to life as the theme music faded. Applause echoed across the studio, warm and routine, masking the tension simmering just beneath the surface. Neil Dudgeon sat stiffly on the guest sofa, hands clasped together, jaw tight. Known to millions as the calm, steady presence of Midsummer Murders, Neil rarely raised his voice in public. He was the definition of measured, polite, and professional. At least, he had been. Across from him sat Denise Welch, confident, sharp-tongued, and unapologetically outspoken. Denise leaned back in her chair, one eyebrow slightly raised, already braced for battle. She thrived in confrontation, and everyone in the studio knew it. The host smiled brightly at the camera. Today, we're joined by actor Neil Dudgeon, here to talk about the new season of Midsummer Murders and his thoughts on modern television culture. Neil forced a small smile. Pleasure to be here. The conversation began smoothly enough. Neil spoke about filming in the countryside, the loyal fanbase, and the importance of long-form storytelling. Denise nodded along, at first. Then came the question. So, Neil, Denise said, leaning forward, her voice deceptively casual, do you think shows like Midsummer Murders are a bit outdated? Some might say they lack diversity and fail to reflect modern Britain. The air changed instantly. Neil blinked once. I don't agree with that at all. Denise smiled thinly. But isn't it true that the show has been criticized for years for being too traditional? Neil straightened up. Traditional doesn't mean exclusionary. We tell stories rooted in specific communities. That doesn't make them invalid. One of the panelists shifted uncomfortably. The host tried to interject, but Denise wasn't done. Come on, Neil, Denise pressed. Isn't it convenient to hide behind tradition instead of evolving? A murmur rippled through the audience. Neil exhaled slowly, clearly choosing his words. I think it's easy to criticize from the outside without understanding the realities of storytelling or audience connection. Denise's eyes flashed. That sounds like a deflection. The host laughed nervously. All right, let's. No, Denise interrupted. I want a straight answer. Do you accept the criticism, or do you dismiss it because the show still makes money? Neil's patience cracked, just slightly. I dismiss the tone of the criticism, he said firmly. There's a difference between constructive discussion and attacking people's work for headlines. The audience gasped softly. Denise leaned forward, voice sharpening. So now I'm attacking. Yes, Neil replied, without hesitation. You are. The studio froze. The host's smile vanished. Producers behind the cameras exchanged panicked looks. This was going off script, and fast. Denise laughed, but there was no humor in it. You come onto Loose Women, and suddenly you can't handle strong opinions. Neil's voice rose, something rarely heard in public. Strong opinions are fine. Disrespect isn't. The applause was scattered, uncertain. Denise crossed her arms. Funny. I'd say dismissing legitimate criticism is disrespectful to viewers. Neil stood up. That single movement sent shockwaves through the studio. I didn't come here to be lectured, he said, voice steady but loud. I came to discuss my work, not be put on trial. The host jumped in. Neil, please, let's all stay seated. But Neil was already pacing. You invite guests, he continued, then ambush them for viral moments. That's not conversation. That's performance. Denise stood too now, matching his energy. Oh please. If you can't handle real talk, maybe don't come on a show built on it. The director shouted from off camera, cut to break in 10. Neil turned toward Denise, eyes blazing. Real talk doesn't mean bullying. The audience erupted, some clapping, some booing. Denise scoffed. Bullying. You're a grown man, Neil. And you're a seasoned broadcaster, he shot back. Act like one. Silence fell like a hammer. The countdown voice echoed. 3, 2. Neil grabbed his jacket. I'm done, he said flatly. The host stood, panic in her voice. Neil, please, don't walk out. But he was already heading toward the exit. Off camera, a producer rushed forward. Neil, we're live. Then air this, Neil snapped. I won't be disrespected for entertainment. Security stepped in, not aggressively, but firmly, guiding him toward the side door as the show cut abruptly to commercials. Behind him, Denise shook her head, lips pressed tight. The cameras stopped rolling, but the chaos didn't. Backstage, voices overlapped, producers shouting, assistants scrambling, phones already buzzing with alerts. Within minutes, social media exploded. Did Neil Dudgeon just get kicked off Loose Women? That Denise Welch clash was brutal. Never seen Neil Dudgeon like this before. Neil stood alone in the corridor, chest rising and falling, adrenaline still pumping. He hadn't planned to make headlines. But now, there was no turning back. Outside the studio, cameras were already waiting. And this, he knew, was only the beginning. By the time Neil Dudgeon reached his car, the world had already made up its mind about him. Phones buzzed non-stop in his pocket, missed calls from his agent, texts from colleagues, and notifications exploding across social media. He didn't check any of them. Not yet. He sat behind the wheel, hands resting motionless, staring through the windscreen as rain began to dot the glass. Inside the studio, the show had resumed as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But outside, a storm was brewing, one that threatened to rewrite his career. The media frenzy. Within an hour, headlines flooded the internet. Neil Dudgeon storms off Loose Women after explosive row. Denise Welch and Neil Dudgeon clash in shocking live TV moment. Was Neil Dudgeon too fragile for daytime TV? Clips of the confrontation looped endlessly, edited, slowed down, replayed from every angle. Some framed Neil as a brave man standing up to bullying. Others painted him as thin-skinned and arrogant. Neil's agent, Mark, finally reached him. "Neil, where are you?" Mark demanded. "In my car," Neil replied calmly. "Good. Don't say anything. To anyone. No statements. No tweets. Nothing." Neil closed his eyes. "They're already saying plenty without me." "That's exactly why you stay silent," Mark said. "Let it breathe." But the silence didn't last long. Inside the studio, back on the Loose Women set, the atmosphere was icy. Denise Welch sat with her arms folded, staring at the makeup mirror as assistants hovered nervously nearby. She had done thousands of live broadcasts, but something about this felt different. A producer approached carefully. "Denise, social media's split. Some are calling it bullying." Denise scoffed. "Bullying? I asked questions. You pushed," the producer replied quietly. And he snapped. Denise stood. "I didn't force him to walk out." "No," the producer said. "But we didn't stop it either." For the first time, Denise hesitated. Public opinion turns. That evening, a respected media analyst appeared on a news panel. "This wasn't just a celebrity spat," she said. "It exposed a bigger issue, how daytime television sometimes prioritizes confrontation over conversation." The words echoed everywhere. Fans of Midsummer Murders rallied fiercely behind Neil. He stayed professional until he was cornered. Denise crossed a line. About time someone stood up to manufactured outrage. Even actors who rarely commented publicly began posting subtle messages about respect and boundaries on live TV. Neil watched none of it. Instead, he sat at home with his wife, quietly replaying the moment he stood up. "I didn't plan it," he said softly. She squeezed his hand. "That's why it was real. The apology that wasn't." The next morning, Loose Women released a statement. "We encourage open debate and regret that emotions escalated during a live broadcast." No apology. No names mentioned. The internet noticed. Denise was asked about it on a radio show later that day. "I won't apologize for speaking honestly," she said. "If someone can't handle robust discussion, that's not my problem." The backlash was immediate and fierce. Neil breaks his silence. 2 days later, Neil agreed to a single interview, on his own terms. Sitting in a quiet studio, he spoke calmly. "I don't regret standing up," he said. "I regret that it reached a point where standing up was necessary." The interviewer asked, "Do you feel you were treated unfairly?" Neil paused. "I think television has forgotten the difference between challenging ideas and provoking people." The clip went viral within minutes. This time, the reaction was overwhelming. Behind closed doors, executives at ITV weren't pleased. Advertisers expressed concern. Viewership numbers spiked, but so did complaints. A senior producer admitted in a meeting, "We lost control of the narrative." Another added, and Neil Dudgeon came out looking human. The question wasn't whether damage had been done. It was to whom. An unexpected call. Late one evening, Neil's phone rang again. Unknown number. He answered. "Neil," a familiar voice said, quieter than he remembered. "It's Denise." There was a long silence. I didn't mean for it to go that far, she said finally. Neil exhaled. Neither did I. I still stand by my opinions, Denise added. But maybe, the way I pushed wasn't fair. Neil nodded, though she couldn't see it. That's all I needed to hear. They didn't become friends. But something shifted. The fallout. Weeks later, Loose Women announced new on-air guidelines for guest discussions. Neil returned to filming Midsummer Murders, the set quieter, more respectful than ever. And somewhere between the headlines and the hashtags, a truth settled in. Sometimes, walking away speaks louder than staying seated.